Well, welcome everybody. And I am so excited to have director Edgar Wright here and Sparks, Ron and Russell Mael. This is so thrilling, the three of you. I wish you guys were in person here at the theater, but it's the next best thing. Edgar, I'm going to start right with you. I'm blown away by your approach to this film. Can you tell us about when did this idea come about to finally do a documentary about the great Sparks?
Well, I guess I've been a fan for a very long time. I first saw Ron and Russell on TV when I was 5 years old, and they'd been something of a riddle to me growing up. And then I guess in the last 20 years, I think I've become like a full-on obsessive. And in a way, when you're a Sparks fan, you start becoming like an evangelist for the band. And not that I necessarily thought about doing a documentary, but I kept kind of saying it aloud to anybody who'd listen, especially like fellow Sparks fans. I'd say, oh, somebody needs to do a documentary about Sparks. Why isn't there a documentary about Sparks? And it was eventually the director, Phil Lord, called me on it. We were at a Sparks gig in 2017. And I said my usual spiel of somebody's got to do a documentary about Sparks. They're the greatest, most influential band that don't have a documentary about them. And Phil Lord said, why don't you make that movie? So I was like, yeah, I will. And then I pitched it to Ron and Russell that night. And that was 3.5 years ago. So here we are.
and Ron and Russell, you must have been approached before by other people to make a documentary about your work, right?
Well, we've been approached, and usually by the wrong kind of people. Obviously, being approached by Edgar Wright means something different than being approached by other people. And we knew that what Edgar would bring, just in the sensibility of what the film would be, but in general, we were opposed to even having a documentary about Sparks. We kind of have always felt that what we do musically and visually on stage and on, just even in videos and LP covers is kind of says more than what could be presented either by us speaking about us or even other people speaking about us. But we realized that when we put ourselves in the hands of Edgar, that it would be done in the proper way, and it would be the one time where things would really be done in the proper way.
We're huge. Obviously, we were huge and are huge fans of Edgar's films. So, when Edgar had approached us, we said, yes, this is the right time to do this, because we just think that the sensibility of Edgar via his films, his kinetic style and his use of music is always really prominent in his films. And we just felt a kinship with the sensibility with Edgar on the visual end and Sparks on the musical end, that the combination of the two of us, it couldn't fail. And we were so happy when we saw the results.
Edgar, I cannot sing your praises enough about your approach to the film. This could have been a pretty straightforward, doc. Instead, I've seen it a couple of times and I can't get enough of it. There's so much stuff that I want to dive into. When did you understand that it needed to have a different approach to the music docs that we're used to seeing?
Well, I guess that's down to the subject matter, really. The great thing about doing it about Ron and Russell and Sparks is because they have such a great sense of humor. In a sense, actually, there's something that Ron says in the documentary about the French New Wave and Jean-Luc Godard. And he says that they love Jean-Luc Godard because he could make movies and also comment on making movies at the same time. And there's a lot of that in Sparks' music in terms of the songwriting, and the sort of the passion behind it is totally sincere, but that doesn't stop them from screwing around with the form a little bit. So I thought that was the best approach for the documentary as well. Is I love Sparks. I'm really passionate about the subject, and I love music documentaries, but that's not going to stop me from you know, like pissing around a little bit,
Messing with the form.
It was just, I mean, also they have such a great kind of visual wit. Well, they in all, not just visual, but like the music, the sort of the album covers, the videos, the stagecraft, that it was just a gift. And they have a great, you know, sense of humor about themselves. So it just meant that like you could kind of like you know, open that vein in a sense, and just kind of get everybody else. What was nice was just all of the other interviews were sort of on board. Everybody kind of fell into sort of like that kind of like style and stuff.
But Edgar, the movie has this very sincere approach. At the same time, it's very ironic, as you talked about. It mirrors the style of their songs. There is a familiar quality to the way it's put together, but at the same time, you alluded to the fact that it's got an edge to it. It's completely different. You're playing with the form. Was it challenging for you to find that balance between sincerity and irony?
I mean, I think it's probably just like our shared sense of humor, me, Ron, and Russell. I mean, we talked about some of the stuff, like there were things that we wanted to do beyond like just the interviews in the archive, like some of the stuff like the FAQ section at the start, which I gave them the questions, but Ron and Russell wrote the answers, and the section in the end credits as well with the you know the new facts to kind of spread around to sort of create new enigmas, and so lots of that stuff, and some of the puns sequences and things was things that we discussed before. But other than that, I think maybe it was just like a naturally came out of just us talking. It was just sort of the gift of the subject matter, really. I mean, it would be the wrong approach to do a sort of a deadly serious documentary about Ron and Russell, because they are so like sort of they are so just amusing, you know, in themselves, you know, and just like sort of and utterly charming. And so it just I feel like there was an element to it where it just happened by osmosis. Is that I had known them for 6 years before. Maybe I'd known them for like sort of 3 years before we started filming, but knowing what they were like in person and talking to them, you know, kind of about Sparks, I sort of knew what they would be like on camera, and I knew what to sort of play off. But I think it also is just a credit to how charming they are as interviewees, that it kind of just, you know, that trickles down through the whole thing.
Ron and Russell, one of the things I love about your band and your music, your albums, is that there's a sense of mystery, and Edgar used the word enigma about who you are. And now you've agreed to do this documentary. Were there certain things that you chose not to? Did you address those things with Edgar, that let's not go there? There's a certain amount of information I don't want given?
No, Edgar, we discussed with Edgar beforehand, and well, one thing is we just entrusted him. We in fact, we initially said, you know, we just hope this is an Edgar Wright film when it comes out, and not this outlier that's this boring documentary. So in that respect, we just said, go for it. And I think Edgar really respects the line between revealing too much about the band and maybe not enough about the band. And so I think there was really a fine balance in the film between those two sides. And I think even more importantly to us, more so than just the, you know, our salacious backgrounds, is just that he wanted to show through the film that all the eras of Sparks were kind of equally valid in their own way, despite times when there'd been big commercial success and times when there was less, albums that had kind of slipped through the cracks more, that Edgar wanted to treat all of the periods with kind of an equal sort of reverence. And that was something that was really appealing to us, that, you know, other times when we had been approached, it was kind of like, well, we're going to focus more on whatever that golden era, whatever someone perceived as the golden era or that golden era. But Edgar, in his way, he kind of wanted to treat all the eras as being equally important. And in fact, what we're doing now is kind of you know, the sort of the pinnacle of all those parts kind of added up.
When,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was
Sorry.
just going to just add to that just briefly, just towards the end of the film, where there are those shots of concerts from Mexico City and Tokyo,
Tokyo.
Los Angeles, and London. You know, that meant so much to us because, you know, Edgar traveled to all those shows with a crew and shot those in order to kind of provide, you know, both a, I don't know, whatever, a triumphant kind of ending to the film, but also to kind of balance, you know, those moments of live hysteria that had happened earlier in our career.
There's 2 points that Russell made, Edgar, that I would love for you to expand on, and one of them was you showing the failures and spending time on those aspects. When I saw the film, I find it so incredibly inspiring because of the amount of time that you spend on the failures. Can you talk about that and your approach?
Well, I saw, you know, there are a lot of music documentaries with bands where, you know, they might skip over an album that hasn't kind of registered, or like a period that like was a failure. But in a way, like the Spark story isn't a traditional like rise and fall and rise. It's like, so for some periods, it's kind of going up and down from album to album. And I think that the important thing is that like I don't want to use the word like hits and misses, because in a weird way it's all character building, but there is a thing where I think the sort of the low moments are as important as the highs, and that is important to the whole story. And like eventually the story of Sparks is almost like the tortoise and the hare in a sense, in terms of like we're now like 50 years on and 25 albums in, and even the ones that maybe didn't register at the time have started to build up their own following. Like I know Ron and Russell were really sort of overwhelmed by the fact that Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers like picked out one of the like the least commercially successful albums and sort of waxed lyrical on that for some time. So in a way, it kind of shows the sort of point of the story is that like if there's a lesson to it all, and Tim, you said it was inspiring, is that it's also what you qualify as success. Is success merely based on sales and airplay or like likes on social media, or is there something else? And I think in a way, like sort of the story of like Ron and Russell's work is that it has reached so many people, and it's also reached people in terms of a huge cultural footprint. So I thought it was really important to show, the downs. And I think sometimes when you see music documentaries where they skip those bits, they're a little disingenuous. And I thought it was important to kind of like lay it all out.
Russell also mentioned about that you gave equal time to each musical period of Sparks. You know, can you tell? And you do, and it's very generous, and we feel we get this full spectrum. You know, can you tell us about that?
Well, I feel like the key part of it is that, you know, I think Ron has said this before, that in some other documentaries you might have like, you know, the 70s, the 80s, and then this happened, and like 10 minutes at the end. But the truth of the matter is that Sparks are still a going concern, and unusually for a band that's been going for this long, is like actually the audience is building, and the audience is also getting younger, which is also kind of unusual. So it is a thing. And I think that's why I wanted to do the documentary. Is I remember that at the gig where I sort of told Ron and Russell about the idea about doing it, I was looking out at the audience and I was really struck by the sort of diversity of age in the audience. And I thought, this is sort of highly unusual. And it is this thing where a lot of bands that like, I think the thing is Ron and Russell have kept making new albums. And the truth of the matter is that it's wrong to sort of say that there was a golden period, because the recent stuff of the last 20 years is as good, if not more ambitious than the stuff back then. I mean, not least you're going to see a Sparks opera in the form of Annette later this year, which takes it on to another level again. So in that sense, it was something where like the present is as important as the past. And like, this is like, for the moment, is the end of the story. I say for the moment, there's like, It's like it's not the end.
I love the plethora of musicians and artists talking about you, Ron and Russell, and I'm curious how does it feel for you to when you saw the film and saw all these musicians being so influenced by what you've done? How did you guys feel?
Well, we work in such a closed off way when, when we're recording, it's just us and kind of, there's no kind of feedback from anybody. And so to see the documentary and to see all these people that Edgar had assembled, speaking about how the music had affected them. And it was, it was really, obviously really touching and inspiring. And, we felt very arrogant for about 2 days after seeing all that. but just because not only the quality of the level of what they mean in their fields, but the fact that they were from so many different areas. They're, just with actors and writers, and then musicians also from so many different styles of music, from, Thurston Moore, and then just Erasure. It's like kind of so broad. So it was incredibly touching to us. And one thing I want to add is just that the people were so conversational in how they appeared in the documentary, and that really was due to Edgar. I mean, he conducted all of the interviews, and I think that rather than being kind of stiff people in some kind of academic way talking about, lyrics or whatever, that the people were just, it was like being in a private conversation that Edgar was having with these people, but just a conversation that a whole lot of people are going to see.
Edgar, for me, I find an incredible emotional connection to watching Ron and Russell and their daily routine. I find it very moving, touching. Can you tell us about incorporating those moments, the importance of those moments for you?
Well, I think because when I first met Ron and Russell in person in 2015, and I went round to Russell's house. So I had before I did the documentary, I had an idea of how they work, having talked to them about it. And I thought that was an interesting thing. And I think sometimes I know, Ron Russell, you sometimes worried about was seeing behind the curtain of seeing that kind of like somehow too down to earth. But I sort of see it in the opposite way. What I love about it, it's almost like the Albert Einstein thing, where Einstein like wears the same clothes every day and eats the same lunch so that all of his brain power goes into his work. And I feel like it's a similar thing with Ron and Russell and their routine and what they do. And then what's on record is like explosive and operatic and dramatic. And it's like, I find it really inspiring because in a weird way, like, it seems like sometimes when you watch other bands that kind of like go down fighting, it sort of seems like they kind of sometimes just squander their talents in a way. And so I think on the flip side, obviously there isn't a lot of kind of like soap opera, kind of like drama in the movie, but in a way I found the fact that they're kind of so dedicated to what they do, and they really do, and they really are. I mean, it's not what I present on the film, it is exactly it. And I'm maybe not today because it's a Sunday, but I suspect yesterday you were working in exactly the same way. So I just thought it's an incredible thing also for artists at the moment. I would hope that not just musicians, but any artist would find it inspiring, because I think a long time ago, Ron and Russell figured out a way to make it work for them. And I think a lot of musicians, even before the pandemic, were trying to do that in terms of how to make their business work for them, or just be creative and stay afloat. And then the pandemic has made things even tougher for all musicians because they can't tour. And so I hope that people would see the documentary and find it actually really inspiring, the ethic of what they do day to day.
Russell, you were going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that this interview today is going to push back the release of our next album by one day. So we can kind of wrap it up now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do
just-
it.
just
No,
kidding.
no, I know you're kidding. I mean, were those having those moments recorded, Brian and Russell, of you guys in your daily routine? Were you self-conscious? Were it you felt comfortable doing them?
No, after the process started, I think, we became more comfortable with it because, like Edgar had mentioned, I think we worked on it with Edgar and his team for like, it was 3 years or so, almost that amount of time. And so after a while, you become friends, and then it's less intimidating having this director that you really admire being in your house and shooting you and going with you on trips to Japan and stuff. And so, after a while it became, well, these are our friends, and so I think then that also helped to make the kind of the atmosphere surrounding just, speaking on camera a lot less intense.
And the one fear was just that viewing the recording process, so many bands, and it's appeared in so many documentaries. They're in, some $500 an hour studio with all these knobs and everything, and there's a guy behind the desk saying, "That was a good one. Can you do one more?" We don't work like that at all. The just modern technology, you can do the exact same thing within a living room. And so, but we were fearful though that people seeing some of the process might make them judge the music. Hey, that isn't so kind of majestic once I see, the kind of amount of equipment. But we know that we can accomplish the exact same things. It just doesn't have all of that kind of gimmickry around it, and it's allowed us also to actually be more adventuresome because we're not worried about the clock, and we're not worried about being foolish in kind of going down these weird paths. If it doesn't work, it's just a day wasted. It isn't that that $5,000 is gone.
Edgar, you add another dimension with the animation. Can you tell us about working with Joseph Wallace and Greg McLeod, who did the animation, and your take on it?
Well, I mean, because Ron Russell's videos are so great, and there are like quite a few like that have animation in them, including, so Joseph Wallace had done a brilliant video for a recent single, Edith Piaf Said It Better Than Me, which was done in stop motion with little Ron and Russells. And actually the first day that I shot one of the London concerts. It was the first day of shooting, and Joseph came to that concert and brought the puppets with him. And I was like, we have to have the puppets in the documentary. So then we sort of started talking about, also obviously with a story that goes back like 50 years of career and then more before, there are obviously anecdotes of where there are no photos and there is no footage. So that was the obvious thing, was to animate some of those things and also do some things in adventurous ways. Like we had from, the mid 70s kind of like Sparks Mania in the UK, there were like tons of like magazine covers, but like, let's do something creative with it. And then, so that was the Joseph Wallace stuff. He did all the stop motion stuff, the plasticine, the cutouts, the puppets. And then Greg McLeod did the 2D animation stuff. They're the very funny little sort of vignettes. And that was really, I'd seen like a sketch that Greg McLeod had done that was really funny. And I kind of nabbed him from that. But one of the great things is that particularly Russell in his interviews tends to paraphrase what people are saying in anecdotes. So it's just like such a gift for animation to animate these little bits. And I was enjoying doing those bits so much, I kept adding them. So I think even after we first submitted it for like Sundance or whatever, we kept adding animation bits because they were, so yeah, it was just like a fun thing to do. I mean, it was just that aspect of, for example, like there's another section where we're talking about the project with Tim Burton that they worked on, but it sadly didn't come together. And that's an adaptation of a manga. So it's my idea of thinking, well, what if we go from the manga itself and then go to sort of when they start talking about the film falling apart, it becomes Ron and Russell in that manga. So just like creative ways of showing things of which there is no archive, you know?
And speaking of archive, there's so much footage in here from all the different concerts, from all the different recording sessions, etc. How, for the three of you, how difficult was it how did you guys get all that archival footage?
Well, for my part, I mean, Ron and Russell themselves are a big source of this, but like we had an amazing archive team headed by Kate Griffiths. And, you know, they put the word out to like, you know, libraries and TV stations all over the world. And obviously there's just an enormous wealth of stuff. And then there were things that like had not been seen for a long time. Like Island Records had this kind of 35mm short, which had never been seen since. And like, you know, so you see some of the recording of the Propaganda album. We also put the word out online, on sort of Sparks' kind of social media channel and mine, asking fans if they had photos, footage, or even just stories. And so not just some of the sort of photos that we got and some of the sort of, you know, some Super 8 footage of some concerts that had never previously been seen, but then also we get stories from fans. And then some of those people we just got to be in the film, like the lady, Julia Marcus, who was the 12-year-old stage invader. Like she wrote her story in an email and my producer George showed it to me and I said, well, this is amazing. We should just get her to say it on camera, right? I mean, and then beyond that is also like Ron and Russell luckily have a lot of stuff themselves, so they can talk about that.
Yeah, Russ, you have all that archival footage, and
Well, we have lots of stuff stored away in you know, in trunks, so we never throw away anything. That's our main fault, but it's paid off finally once that we have all these, you know, open it up and they smell a little mildewy, but apart from that, you can't catch that on camera. So it worked out well. Yeah.
And how challenging, Ed, was it to edit this? I mean, you're covering 50 years, a span of a career, and you have all this archival footage yeah, how was it challenging to condense it into a 2.5 hours?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just I think it's just kind of finding, like, it's, you know, you're just kind of sort of trying to sort of tell the story in the most organic way possible. And, you know, I mean, in terms of like the archive, looking at the nothing about the film was a chore for me. Like, you know, I think it was just kind of like, you know, when I'm making a narrative film is sometimes really sort of tough. You know, this was just kind of fun. And there's aspects of it, like just looking through the archive is like, there's a lot of stuff to watch, but just sitting down of an afternoon and clicking like Sparks 1975 and just watching every single thing there is was just amazing. I think it was just a case of like, I mean, also I think the interesting thing for me at least is that because the documentary is obviously about Ron and Russell and Sparks, but it's also about the people they inspired and also the changing of the times. So you get to kind of show through their story the sort of the story of pop culture in the last 50 years. So that in itself was kind of just fascinating. And as a fan myself, is that all the little tangents was all the kind of fun stuff. It's like, you know, so you'd sometimes kind of like get, and also I know like Spark fans like would want to kind of see about stories. So when it was announced that we were making it, people say, oh, I hope you're going to talk about Roller Coaster. It's like, oh yes, we'll talk about Roller Coaster. I'm not going to skip over that bit. I mean, the thing to me that was just you know, it was just, I mean, one thing that there was an interesting thing that happened is I did a cut that was a little bit shorter at one point, and I showed it to a director, and they said, I only have one note. It was actually Phil Lord again. I swear he doesn't get paid every time I mention him, but he said, I love it, but I want to hear a bit more of the songs. And I knew he was right, because I think sometimes you have music documentaries that assume prior knowledge of the band, or if you're making a film about the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, you don't really have to stop for the songs. But I think here it was important to let people hear the song so you could kind of fall in love with them, and come away from the film with a whole bunch of earworms. So that was important. And so it was actually something where I didn't want to make it so breakneck that you never get a chance to hear the songs, which is one of my sort of bugbears about some music documentaries.
There, you in the editing, you use your super fast edits, and we've talked about the fact that you're using animation and all this. I mean, you're constantly breaking the rules of what is expected to be a music doc. Was that something, I mean, that where you were conscious as you were making it, is like, you know, I'm just gonna break all the rules of what is expected to be done?
I mean, I guess in the sense, again, I just like take that from the band. I take that from Ron and Russell, is that like what they do in their work is constantly kind of like playing with the form. So it just seemed like a no-brainer to do that, and fun to do that. Like, it didn't have to be kind of so, I think it, you know, like it was just nice to do like a film done in the style of Sparks. But I think also we have a shared sense of humor. I think that's maybe why I like the band, is I feel like sort of just that they like, I feel like it's that thing with some bands where you feel like you want to be part of that club. I always said like that when I was first listening to Sparks when I was really young, like when I was like 5, I equated it almost with like listening to Monty Python albums, where it's like at 5, or like when you're very young, it's like, I don't understand it, but I want to be smarter. And I think that's a nice thing to say about an artist, is that you want to kind of like understand the references. So they're a great band to kind of grow up with, because there's so much to sort of learn and unpack.
Yeah, but I mean, you're downplaying the fact that, I mean, I love the fact that you say this was a no-brainer to do it this way, but nobody else had done it before, and you do it. So,
well, I mean, some of the things I think it didn't occur to me that they were different until I was doing them. For example, it never occurred to me to not shoot Ron and Russell in a 2-shot for all of the interviews, because I'd only ever really met Ron and Russell together. But then I sort of thought, as I was doing it, thinking, I guess this is kind of quite unique, because like if you were doing an Oasis documentary, or you were doing a documentary about the Kinks, you would never have Liam Gallagher and Noel Gallagher together, and you would never have Ray Davies and Dave Davies together. So the fact that Ron and Russell would sit there together, and sometimes that gives you sort of gold, where you can sort of see the sense of humor of two brothers coming out. And so those things, a couple of things, I didn't necessarily think that was a strange thing until I was, not strange, but like that it was like a somewhat unique thing until I was actually doing it.
And Brian and Russell, I want to hear your feelings about the fact that you're hitting the zeitgeist in the cinema world. You have 2 major projects. Edgar alluded to the fact that Annette, your film, is about to premiere at Cannes Film Festival with Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. Can you tell us about how you feel having these 2 major films about you coming to birth?
Yeah, we're happy that it kind of it vindicates Edgar's whole thesis in the movie. Had Annette not happened, it would have been a different ending to the documentary, maybe. So it's just odd to us that after all this time, we'd been working on Annette for 8 years, that it chooses to land right around the same time as the documentary that Edgar's been working on for 3 years. So it's just one of those weird, situations. But we're, obviously, because it was touched on in the documentary, how we had other flirtations with film projects in the past that didn't materialize. And so now at this point in our weird career, to now have a film that we wrote and starring Adam Driver and really great director Leos Carax, and opening the Cannes Film Festival, it's kind of like, what, one of those.
And Edgar, you're having a similar situation where you have a major film coming out in the fall, which I can't wait to see. Last night
We've seen it. We've seen it too here.
They've seen Last Night in Soho, and I've seen Annette, so we can you know,
Yeah.
we can talk about it
Yeah.
separately.
Honest reviews. Last Night in Soho, stunning.
Well, I gotta get a promise
That
from
wasn't
all
a
of
good. That wasn't a good review, probably, but no, that made it less than it is. No, it's
Stunning,
actually
says
amazing
Russell
film.
Mael and Sparks.
And you can do the Siskel and Ebert like thumbs.
well, as I was gonna say that I gotta get I gotta get a promise that you guys are gonna come back in the fall live at the here in Santa Barbara when the movies come out.
That would be
From
terrific.
both films, both.
We would. I mean, the only bittersweet thing about this process and the film coming out, and we're so thrilled that like Focus are releasing it in theaters. The only downside is, as yet, me and Ron and Russell have not been in the same room to watch it, which we all know is gonna change in like sort of within weeks. But like it's been the only like sort of tiny downside is that we haven't actually had the chance to be together and watch it together.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for being here. You have given me for years. All three of you have brought so much joy with your movies and with your albums, and the fact that you converge in this project for me was nirvana. So thank you so much for
Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks very much.
And we'll see you in the fall.
We will.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank
Well,
you.
Bye.
See you soon. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thanks, Edgar. Yeah.